Hi there. Haven't done one of these before, but enough stuff piled up after the release of the Connections video that I wanted to do a follow-up. Some stuff people pointed out, some stuff I missed, and some stuff that really got me thinking and includes a lot of new insight. Then, once I went through all that, I asked the Sodaman Discord server if there's anything else I should include, so thank you to them for the help in making sure this follow-up is as complete as possible, and if you'd like to participate in future videos like that, make sure you join. Let's start with some Spamton stuff. In the original Connections video, I alluded to Spamton's situation. I mentioned the garbage noise in connection to Spamton's calls, described by the Addisons and by Tenna. I don't think I gave the similarities between Spamton and Kris's situation quite enough time and explanation, and I think the YouTube user CharDreamer9337 points it out quite well. From this, I think we could say that Spamton was being puppeteered through his phone in a similar way as Kris, since he was emitting garbage noise, although I don't know yet how this recontextualizes his story. Kris and Spamton both represent a subject under complete control by an outside force. Spamton's strings are literal wires puppeting his movements, while Kris's are metaphorical, Kris being both under control of the player but also Carol, as according to the ideas put forth in the Connections and in the Using Math to Solve Deltarune videos, Kris's promise is being used as a compulsive force by Carol to control Kris. Both of these centers of control are represented by phone calls. Spamton and Kris's phones produce the garbage noise, a signifier of the direct control the connection from the shelter has on both of them, and Kris's calls with Carol representing the metaphorical controlling connection she has over Kris. As for recontextualizing Spamton's story, reading CharDreamer's comment got me thinking about Hyperlink Blocked, and how if there truly was a connection from the shelter controlling Spamton, that the words Hyperlink Blocked as a source for his freedom could be read quite literally. Hyperlink Blocked is the power to block the link between him and the shelter, which would become the source of freedom for both Spamton and Kris. As for why the soul would then be the source of said Hyperlink Block, I think you could look towards the idea of the demon and angel souls that I brought up in the Using Math video as a potential answer. And, as a fun addition, I thought this line from Spamton's fight was particularly apt. Then we'll be the ones making the calls, Kris. They'll hear the ring of heaven's call. So, I had that in mind during the whole video. How can one make a theory about the angel talking through the phone while missing the line about the angel being tied to the phones? Because I'm a big dumb idiot, that's why. By far my biggest miss in this video was completely missing this connection to the connection theory. Definitely a moment of focusing on the tiny details and missing the big picture, literally, right in front of my face. I tunneled onto the voice aspect and neglected probably the biggest piece of evidence that the phone is pivotal to the soul's control over Kris, or in the case of Player Angel, Heavens, the realm we as the player occupy, which exists across the boundary of the light and dark worlds, control over Kris. But this prophecy panel isn't the only one I think we can draw on here. This prophecy panel is one of a pair, linked physically by their location, digitally by their file names, and thematically by their subject matter. They'll see the tale of hell take crawl. If the first is referencing the phone call linking the player in heaven to the soul, then what could this opposing panel, referencing hell and a tale taking crawl, be referring to? It's the opposite in every way. Heaven versus hell, hearing versus sight, taking flight by the winged art versus taking crawl. Well, consider the unscrambled verse by the organic. Lost where the forest would grow, the children followed the pointed tail. And by the organic stirring battle, the tale which must not be followed. I think this panel represents the opposite of the first, an antagonistic force exerting its control over others, leading and coaxing unsuspecting people deeper under its control. We, the player, have never been in control of Spamton, so to whom is Spamton connected to and controlled by? He was lured into the clutches of the puppet strings by promises of success, promises that he'd be a big shot, and I think there's a good chance that it was by this tale of hell. There's a character I haven't referenced a single time throughout my videos, because I think there's both enough there for an entire video, while simultaneously nothing there at all, and that is image_friend. Linked to the same connection by its all caps naming scheme in the code, following the same naming scheme of the elements of the device layer. I think friend is a candidate for another being exerting its control over the connection, with it being no coincidence that their first appearance was in the basement of Queen's Mansion, where the empty disc is found and where we fight Spamton. Let's talk about Kris's voice. I asked for your help in killing my pet theory, and y'all provided. The strongest, I think, is during the weird root. Hey Kris. What happened? You started saying something, then you bit the hell out of your hand. Damn, that's gonna bruise. YouTube user Deltarune was, I believe, the first to point this out. I don't think Kris would need to bite the hell out of their hand, something they only do on the weird route. They pull the yawn trick again if you decide to be needlessly cruel dramatic on the normal route. If the sound was ultimately originating from their phone, that simply wouldn't be necessary, and is only something they do when pushed much further than usual. Biting the hell out of their hand, to me, makes the most sense if they're trying to smother words issuing from either their hand, unlikely, or their mouth, the normal place humans issue most of their communication noises from. I do agree that I think biting makes the most sense if Kris's voice is coming exclusively from their mouth, like you'd expect. I don't think it's a 100% slam dunk, as a small, unexpected happening has been enough of a jolt to interrupt the soul's choices in the past, like Susie interrupting or shouting, or Mini Kris stabbing at Susie, so it could be that the bite was just intended to inflict enough pain over the shared connection to stifle the soul's choice, instead of their usual methods of rebellion, because that choice was so offensive to Kris. But at that point, it does feel like digging deeper, so I think the side of sanity, and the comments, says the phone might be the conduit of the connection, but Kris's voice is still entirely coming from their mouth. My insanity is sticking with the phone speaker though. Moving on to the Discord discussion, a very Christmassy WD Gaster brought up a couple questions that are interesting. Do you think we will get concrete answers on how we, the soul, are connected with Kris? I hope so. If we get any answers about the exact mechanics going on with the soul, the player's connection, and the nature of the Dark Worlds, it'll probably be in a sequence similar to the True Lab section of Undertale, and I'd be surprised if it came sooner than near the climax of the story. Also, don't you think Kris could save on their own without the soul connection, given the save file in Chapter 1? Kris's save file is super interesting. This, combined with the flavor texts indicating Kris reached out to it out of habit, and others that make it seem like Kris is familiar with the save points, does indicate that Kris has used them in the past. When exactly is the question, and Kris's save file has neither time nor location associated. The timer in our save file begins the moment we launch Chapter 1, the moment we the player begin the program which eventually connects us to the soul. If Kris at some point saved when that timer is at 0, then they were present at the exact moment the device was turned on. This could have been some time in the past when Kris originally went to the shelter, if the connection is indeed routed through the shelter, initially connecting Kris's soul to that network before the player is ever involved. By the time we the players make a save, Kris's will has already been overwritten. Us saving over their file is just revealing the current state of things to the player via the UI. There's a lot more to get into regarding the save file that I think I'll save for a future video. Cappy on Discord shared some very interesting thoughts regarding the device theory and the nature of the garbage noise, but what I want to focus on is the note here. I believe the proceed thing doesn't actually have Kris talk. As if you choose please don't, Noelle feels like she shouldn't, even if Kris doesn't say something. I'm not sure how Kris makes Noelle feel like that, but it happened. I believe if it was Kris talking, the voice would have already scared Noelle. I brought up Noelle not freaking out about the first proceed briefly in the original video, but I think this is a good point to bring up in full. There's something odd about this choice regardless of whether or not you believe the crackly, menacing voice that scares Noelle comes from the phone or not. Noelle clearly is afraid of the sound of that voice, demonstrated by her reaction and saying, "Kris, your voice, it..." And in her head, that voice, how? The voice from my dream. So we can safely assume that in this choice, Noelle doesn't hear that voice. However, her reaction does change based on your choice here. I mean, I know you didn't say anything, but I guess let's just leave it at, "I'm glad you're back," versus her continuing on with the conversation. The only real explanations for me are either Kris's body language changes in a way that we can't see based on our answer, or that the soul has some sort of faint mental link between itself and Noelle, maybe having manifested by the soul's actions during the weird route. It has to be something more faint than the usual commands, otherwise Noelle would have interpreted this proceed as being the same as the others, so the other proceeds can't have been entirely mental. There is some difference between a command being given when we're inside versus outside Kris's body. That mental link would also go some way towards explaining our ability to read Noelle's and other characters' minds. If the soul just has some innate ability to react to and influence people's minds in tiny ways, and these small influences are why Noelle is nudged towards either continuing or stopping her line of conversation over the events of the previous night. Again, I think this just has to be true regardless of any phone stuff, because even if Kris is always just speaking our commands aloud, they aren't doing so here, and Noelle is still being influenced, so it's a little messy no matter what. And that's that. I think I've covered everything that's been on my mind since the video's release. If there's anything else I missed, or any questions you've had, feel free to leave a comment or join the Discord and ask me. I'll do my best to answer. I don't see myself doing videos like this every time, but the Connections video was such a big project that I wanted to be thorough and make this little companion to it. Thanks for watching.